Attention, my gorgeous listeners. All my new interviews will be on a new podcast feed called This Football Life. So please subscribe to my new podcast and listen to this interview on that podcast feed. If you like the Football Autobiography Show, I promise you'll like that one too. So I repeat one more time. The Football Autobiography Show is now This Football Life and has a new feed. So on whatever podcast app you're listening to this episode, please search for This Football Life and subscribe, and you can hear this entire interview there. Thanks. Welcome to This Football Life, the show that gives you intimate, in-depth interviews with football's most interesting players, coaches, backroom staff, and executives. Walk a mile in their shoes and see the game through their eyes. I'm your host, Josh Schneider-Weiler, and it is such a pleasure to be with you all. Our guest today is physiotherapist Rob Swire. Swire was Manchester United's assistant physio from 1991 to 1999, where he worked mostly with the youth teams and the reserve team. In 1999, he became the head physiotherapist, and he was the head physiotherapist until 2014, where he worked alongside Sir Alex Ferguson and helped the club win a staggering 35 trophies. In his time, he treated more than 1,000 injuries and worked alongside some of the game's biggest stars like Cristiano Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney. Before working at United, he worked at the NHS for 5 years and then at Halifax Town before he got his big break with United. He now lectures nationally and internationally in sport injury management and works as a consultant for the Injured Jockeys Funds, where he guides the rehabilitation of injured jockeys. I went up to his West Yorkshire home to sit down with him to talk about his career, what's the first thing he asks when he treats a player on the field, and what is life really like for a physio. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Rob Swire. All right, I'm here in beautiful Halifax with Rob Swire. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks for coming on the show. I've been really looking forward to this. Before we get to some of your days as a physio, I read that you are into running and cycling competitions. What are we talking here? Ironmans or triathlons?
No, nothing like that. I'm not much good at swimming, so I give all the triathlons a miss. And I'm struggling with my running at the moment as well.
Okay, so what do you do, like 10Ks or marathon?
Yeah, so 10Ks. I did have an idea of doing a marathon before I'm too old, and then that's put pay to my hip. My hip's playing up a bit with trying to do it marathon training, so I need to knock that on the head, I think. I'm having a bit of rest at the minute. Busy with other things actually, but I'm just about to start up again. I'll have another go at running, but if my hip plays up again, I'll just leave that, go back to cycling.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, you have an interesting career kind of path. You started before you were at Halifax Town. You were at the NHS. Can you kind of explain what you were doing at the NHS and then why you decided to move into football?
Yeah. No, I went into physiotherapy wanting to do sports injuries. And it's quite a long time ago now. When I qualified in 85, so 32 years ago, 1985. I always wanted to work in sports, but at that time there wasn't a lot of jobs in sports, very few jobs in sport. So I worked in the NHS, but I also think that it's very important to get a background of general physiotherapy awareness, because if you're working in a football club, every injury that you see isn't a sports injury. You see all sorts of things, and it's very important to have a wider background, a wider base of knowledge before you specialise in sport. That's something I came across all the time. When I was working at United, people were always looking for jobs, writing in for jobs and writing in for advice of how they should get into physiotherapy, desperate to get into sports physiotherapy at the earliest opportunity. And I always advise them to work in the NHS for a few years, at least 3 years, 3 to 5 years, get some basic experience behind you, then start thinking about specialising. But when you're 20 years old, you just wanted desperate to get into sports straight
That's
away.
not the glamorous
yes,
job.
it is. Everyone wants to go into it straight away. You've got 5 years spare to build up your experience, but nobody thinks like that when they're that young. They want to have it there and then.
Yeah, you said a lot of general injuries would just happen at United that aren't really sports injuries. Can you be a little bit more specific?
No, the majority are all sports injuries, certainly, but there are things that you pick up. They'll come in with a bad back or a bad neck. They've slept awkwardly on a neck. That's nothing to do with the sport, like anybody can do, and non-sports type back problems and postural issues, things like that. You always have the staff to look after, which they're not usually sports injuries or not recent sports injuries, maybe old arthritic type sports injuries and things like that. So you are seeing, and you're not just seeing sports injuries, basically. You do see all sorts of other things as well.
Yeah. So how did you end up going from the NHS to Halifax Town?
Yeah, a lot of the chances I've had, I think, right place at right time can be described. And when you speak to many other people, it's exactly the same thing. People who do well in life and seem to have the right opportunities, quite often it's the right place at the right time to give yourself a chance. As I was working in the NHS, I wanted to work more in sports injuries, and there weren't very, very few jobs in sports injuries at the time. And the way of doing it then tended to be starting a private practice, sports injury practice. So I started that in Halifax at the Leisure Centre, and through that, I was invited by the physiotherapist at the time at Halifax Town, who was gone on maternity leave, to cover for her maternity leave from about March through till the end of the season, end of May. So I was happy to do that. So I ended up doing that. And then she was not looking to go back afterwards. She wasn't particularly enjoying that. She had a private practice, and she wasn't particularly that bothered about working in the sports environment, and so she withdrew from that job, and then they offered it to me over that summer, and that was it.
Wow,
that was my first opportunity.
Yeah. And then a year later, you're moving to Manchester United. You go from
meteoric rise.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you were a player going from League Two to the first, first division,
it's a big jump.
So, how did that come about?
Yeah, they advertised. There was a physiotherapy journal that came out then every month with the scientific articles in it, and then also the general chit chat around it, and they had all the adverts for jobs in there. And I don't think they said Manchester United, I can't remember. It said a football club was looking for a masseur, so not even a physiotherapist. But they were advertising the physiotherapy journal, which seemed strange. So I thought, well, I can always apply and see. And if they were after a masseur, then that's fine. I won't be suitable for that role. But if it was a physiotherapist, and it was, they were after a physio, but didn't want to advertise that because they'd have too many applicants. So I went for that and had a couple of interviews and ended up getting that job as a physiotherapist there.
Wow. So that you really took just like a punt, and, just kind of hoping it would be
very much so. Yeah. Wow. So I was in the right place, right time to get a chance at Halifax. Because I was working at Halifax Town, that did give me a big chance at Manchester United. If I hadn't been working at Halifax, I don't think I would have had that opportunity. But even then, it wasn't advertised as a physiotherapy opportunity. So, right place, right time. But then, again, talking to other people, a common theme people say is you have to take the chance with two hands. You really grab it and really work as hard as you can. And
you're, I think at this time, you're around 27 or 28, and you've kind of just, had this, hit your dream job.
Yes, well, that was it. Yes, there's nowhere else to go really after Manchester United. I stayed there 23 years.
Wow, so I'm curious, when you first get there, and before you'd been working at Halifax, which is small club, and you all of a sudden at this massive club. I mean, what were some of the big challenges at the time, or of just adjusting to that sort of change? Yeah,
the leap at that time in 1991, I went to United. It was a different era then, even though it's about 27 years ago, is it now? The difference between the two clubs was not as big as what it is now. It's an enormous gulf now. But there again, if I was making that transition now, there was only one physiotherapist at Manchester United when I went there. I became the second physiotherapist. When I left, I think we had it will be first about 7 full-time physiotherapists and 12 part-time physiotherapists at the club, compared to 2 when I went. So it is a whole different ball game now, and the facilities that we have, that they have now, fantastic, really big. When I went there in 1991, it wasn't massively different to Halifax Town.
Okay.
It was surprising. Looking back on it, it was surprising. But the sport was a much smaller sport at the time, and a lot of tradition in it. And apart from football, there's very little done by players for training. They came in and they played football. Now there's an awful lot of off-pitch work that they do. And back in 1991, it was only just beginning to come in.
Yeah, and so I'm curious. Take me through your average day as a physio. You know, a lot of physio live kind of behind the scenes, as we were talking about before we came on. You know, behind the scenes, what's the average day like for a physio? When do you get to the training pitch, or what?
Yes, yeah. Well, I got there early in the morning, but I live a long way off, so I didn't want to sit in rush hour traffic getting to Manchester. So I used to arrive there about 6:30, 7:15. I could have a shower there, get changed, have some breakfast, and then start working. And I had a couple of hours there where I could sort of prepare everything ready for when the players came in. I always found it helped me a lot to be sort of well prepared. The other staff, the other physios would come in at a similar time. They were all maybe followed my lead perhaps and came in. So we'd go through various things we're going to do with the players. So we'd have a physiotherapy department plan, if you like, what we'd do. The doctor would come in quite early as well, and we'd go over everything again, what we needed to liaise over. So then there'd be a medical department sort of plan of what was happening. Towards the end, when the sports science department was building up, we'd have meetings with the sports scientists as well. So there'd be a whole sports medicine department plan of action. You'd then meet with the coaches, with different physios working with different groups. We'll go off and meet the coaches, see what the plan was for the coaches, update them on the injuries, and then there'd be a whole football club plan for that team of what they were doing. And then the players would start to arrive, and everything always start going wrong then when they'd arrive. They come in with new injuries, little problems. Some might be better than they expected. Perhaps they could return to training. Others came in with something new that they hadn't said anything about the day before. So there was a lot of revision then up until training started. So around about 10 o'clock, training would start with the players. And at that point, up to that point, you're dealing with the fit players more. So I'd be based in the changing room for about 9 o'clock till 10 when they started training. I'd be in the changing room. Players would come in. You'd deal with any little minor things, ongoing management and things that they needed. You'd pick up any new injuries and deal with those. Then 10 o'clock, the fit players would leave. So up till 10 o'clock, really, you're dealing with the fit players. After 10 o'clock, you're dealing with injured players till typically around about 12, maybe, and then the team would finish training and come in, depending what day it was and how much they were doing. They'd come in and you'd spend time with the fit players again, and the injured players would have their own work to do, or would have lunch or wait for you, and then you'd have some lunch yourself, and then start again in the afternoon with the injured players. You'd be working with them until they were finished, and then usually you'd have a bit of a sort of review of the day. Not so much formal, you'd be doing that all the way during the day as you're anyway, but you'd formulate an end of day plan, and often speak with the coaches again then to let them know what's expected of the following day until the players arrive, and then it all goes wrong again.
and so how would that change for a game day?
Yeah, well, they were usually in a hotel the day before a game, so that will be a typical pattern the day before a match. So if it's a Saturday match, that what I've described there will be a typical Friday. But then some point in Friday afternoon, you'd be travelling to the hotel. If it was a home game, we would meet at I think it was 7 o'clock, Old Trafford, and go to a hotel in Manchester. If it was an away game, you'd leave at whatever time was necessary for wherever you're going. you get into the hotel there. There might be some bits and pieces to do with the players there. So any ongoing little bits and pieces. None of the injured players were travelling with you, so the players were fit, but you might have a few bits to do with them. All my time were there with Alex Ferguson. We would eat with the staff separately, which, looking back on it, was a very good idea. At the time, quite often I was tired after a heavy week and just wanted to get an early night. But looking back on it, it really was beneficial for the team spirit of the staff.
Can you elaborate why that is?
It was a time when you could relax and chat. There's sometimes some business talk there, but the majority of the time it was just nothing to do with work, football. You'd talk about everything and anything under the sun, and just have a nice, relaxed chat and get to know each other a lot more, away from the stresses and strains of work, which is very difficult if you're at work. You're always focusing on work, but that sort of Friday evening or Saturday evening, whenever it was, you could relax a bit more. And looking back on it, it was a really, really good idea of the managers to work that with the staff. It's not commonly done now. Usually the staff and players will all eat together, but you focus then again on football. And it was a good idea to have that outlet every week, once or twice a week.
So even in like 2013 or in Alex Ferguson's last year, are you guys still doing this? Or
yes, yeah, right up to his last year, right from the very beginning. They did it before I travelled with the team. Then when I started travelling, I got used to that routine.
Okay, so is that where you built a lot of your closest relationships with other staff in the club? Or?
Well, overall you do that really, was at work as well as and those events as well. But when you're working with people very closely, you build up good relationships with them and good working relationships. Yeah.
Because I always, from the outside, I always thought the best or that physios might have like the closest relationships with players, and you tell me if I'm wrong, with players more than perhaps any other coach, because you're with them on the treatment table for 10, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even an hour at a time. Just one-on-one with a player. Am I reading that correctly?
To a degree, yes. There is that. That's traditionally quite often the way you do have very good relationships with the players. You need good relationships with the players, obviously, working so closely with them. And you are a bit in between. You're clearly one of the staff, but you're a little bit in between the players and the football staff, the coaching staff. But there's a variety. It's a lot of that is personal and individual to the person. I always kept a certain professional distance from the players. Some physiotherapists are very, very friendly with the players. That's fine. That works for them. Myself, I always found I felt like a little bit of a professional sort of barrier there. But that's my personality. I just find generally I've got a few close friends. And it takes me a long time to get to know people very well and things like that. But that's just me personally. A lot of physiotherapists do build up very good, close relationships with their players.
Is there any player or players in particular that you just found yourself, maybe because they were just injured so much, or because they just were such great people that you got on really well with?
Yeah, well, the ones who were out for a long time, you got to know more and better, and you got to understand them very well, and you'd see a lot of bad times with them with their injuries as well. So there was certainly that. But then individual players as well. Some are a lot more open and chatty. I always got on. Well, I started my first week at Manchester United was the same time that the class of '92 started.
Of course.
So I came through. I was looking after the youth team then. So I'd be looking after all of those and the weekend games. Then when they were playing in the reserves, I'd be working with the reserves and get to know them there. They all got to the first team a bit before me, but I started working with the first team in '99, and so then you're working with them every day there again as well. So for maybe 20 years, I was working with that tight sort of group of players. and they were tight,
Yeah, so
very friendly
we're
themselves.
We're talking like David Beckham and
The
Gary
Nevilles,
yeah,
Nicky Butt, Paul
yeah.
Scholes, Ryan Giggs.
Yeah.
He was there a year earlier, Ryan. He was a year older than the others. But that group, they were very close themselves, and they still are now. And working with them for such a long time, you had very good working relationships with them. And being based in the changing room when I was working with the first team, you hear all the the banter, as they call it, in the changing room, and you get to know them very well with that, which is good. It makes it easier to work with.
Who is the funniest of all the ones that you, or that would be most liable for you to get a joke out of? When you were there?
Nicky Butt was always a very funny man. It livened the changing room up every day.
Is there you're smiling right now from ear to ear, so I'm curious, is there a particular instance that you're thinking of? Or?
No, not particularly. So many, I can't think of any now off the top of my head. But he was a really good man for the team building in the changing room. He was very, very good with the young players who came in. So he was a senior established player playing for England, Manchester United, won so many trophies and everything. And yet the young players who came in, he was really good with them. Not in a not in a friendly way. I mean, he wasn't friendly, but he would bring them into the conversations, involve them.
Way.
He would involve them all the time, often in a bit of friendly banter and everything, but very inclusive. He was very good that way with the young players coming in, and it made their integration a lot easier, a lot better. He was very good. You
mentioned you were with the youth team from 1991 to 1999 when you became the chief physio at United.
Yeah.
How different was it dealing with primarily youth players more than when you shifted to older players?
There's no sort of general pattern. It's very much individual, I think. So some individuals are difficult to deal with, whether they're 16 or whether they're 30.
Yeah.
And some are very easy to deal with at 16 or 30 or 35. It's more individual rather than age-based, I think. There's a lot of difficulties with some of the young players who perhaps felt they'd arrived and had made it as a professional when they still had a long way to go. The majority of the times, those players with that attitude didn't ever make it properly to the top. And yet you hear that from many other people working in sport. They're different. I couldn't say it was harder working with the first team than with the youngsters, or easier necessarily, because some people are very easy, very professional to deal with, others less so. So it makes it more difficult.